of cycle update.
Not sure if it's max equation or minimum equation. CryptoTalk.fm. My name is Leister. I'm your host, back with our second episode for the weekend. Our special series on the drama that is side drama, all the chaos, all the bullshit. I got to be honest, that's what it is. We have done extensive coverage of this fiasco. We talked about VFam and that involvement. We talked about the cult leader, Russ Armand. We have not yet talked about Max Hernandez, MaxEquation. And the reason that we left Max for this episode, we weren't sure what Max's involvement really was. We suspected from being involved in the project that Max Hernandez was a bit player, just a rookie, a nobody, just somebody that was hired, brought in to create a product and eventually failed. But we thought he was just brought in to create a product. Little did we know, according to all the case docs that we saw, it's possible, and this is simply speculation, I have no evidence of any of it. It's possible that Max Hernandez was one of the main brain children behind what would become Saitama, but he wasn't involved in the Saitama. I'm saying that Saitama Inu, which evolved into Saitama, that Max Hernandez was one of the key people behind Saitama Inu and its eventual evolution into Saitama. How can I make such a statement? Why would I make such a statement? What do I have? What evidence do I have? I don't have any evidence at all. I have what I see and what appears to be statements in the case docs, as well as statements from Max himself, that lead me to believe in some filings, that lead me to believe he was a lot more involved than we all thought he probably was. Anybody who was in the project will remember he was the guy, the somewhat chubby guy. He would get on the video with cult leader where they're getting beat up because Saitama is a catastrophic failure and not out yet and delayed and buggy and all these issues. He was the chubby guy that was just sitting there quietly in some office. That office was basically co-working space. For those that don't know what co-working space is essentially a building owned by a company where they are renting out some of the office suites as working space, either for employees of other companies that don't want to spend the money themselves, or for people like you and I. So for example, let's say that you have the opportunity to work from home. Your company says, yeah, sure, you can work from home or you can work from wherever is acceptable. We just have to make sure it's it's got all the stuff necessary to get the job done. You can rent out a co-work space, charge you maybe $100 to $300. And some of them, they'll offer mail services, they'll offer phone, receptionist. It's a building, an actual building. So one of my companies at a distant past life had a co-working space set up at a space. This is in Nevada. And I had access to the conference rooms. That's where I onboarded two of my employees. So I rented out the conference room. They brought me beverages. They answered the phone. They received mail, the whole nine. Big picture. So the point is that Saitama, LLC, and to a lesser degree, Saitama-Lily Finance, LLC, were set up in co-working spaces when they were registered. The registered addresses pointed to co-working spaces, largely in Texas. Max Hernandez was listed on one of these. That surprised me. I didn't expect to see his name as the registered agent for one of these different filings. Let's follow the chain. Now, Max left Twitter 2022-ish. He left all the stuff up there. I don't see that he deleted anything, so maybe he was too stupid to do it or something happened to him. I'm not really sure, because I know they caught up with him. And what I was told is that he took a plea deal. So essentially admitting he was part of the scam. But we're going to follow this chain of chaos and see what we can parse out about MaxEquation, aka MaxSaitama, Max Hernandez. We begin our story June 2021. That's the very first time that we hear anything from Max Hernandez on Twitter. And all he does is he's showing a picture of a short pump. It was a one-day short pump of the Saitama token. And he retweeted, at the time, Fast and Doge on Twitter with a basic short pump after this in August. Now, here's where things started to take a turn to the bizarre. in August, Jake Gain does a live show with allegedly the Saitama people. I don't know that for sure because Jake since deleted said video. I find it suspicious that Jake deleted said video, but it doesn't surprise me they deleted said video because, of course, what we would learn later after the failed November 13th Vegas event. That's August 11th. 2 days later, MaxEquation points out and shares a video from a YouTube person called Making It Happen, who had what he called a podcast. It wasn't really a podcast. It was basically a live stream called Married with Crypto. On this live channel, Russ, Saitama Guru 1, is in the chat with the regular community. And the guy, this person for this show, is pointing out a graph. And if you look at the graph, it's a 1-day graph. Now, this is the same day as the broadcast. The broadcast, of course, is August 13th. The chart basically was climbing to a point and then there's major sells that happened and it went all the way back down essentially to its entry point. And the person is calling out that this might be a good entry point. He literally said that in the video. Russ was talking about doing a giveaway, and there was chatter, including him, talking about how high the gas fees were. You remember when I talked about I was in the project, I wasn't in a big way because the gas was outrageous on the Ethereum chain. I could not justify the amount that was being asked of me to do simple trades. And I didn't have as much money as I do now, certainly to buy in. And I couldn't justify, if you're doing $100 trade and they're charging $100 in gas, like it didn't make any sense. That's what the messaging was at the time. That's what I theorize might have been contributing to the decline of price, not necessarily sells, but a loss of volume, that the volume started to decrease as the Ethereum gas fees started to skyrocket. This right around the August timeframe is also when the NFTs, so I'm talking in general, but also Saitama Inu, NFTs became more of a thing, and the minting of NFTs contributed a lot to the gas fee spikes that we would see. So when Saitama jumped on board with the NFTs and launched those, they were selling like crazy. So you have major pressure on this side and gas fees spiking to where the low level investors couldn't invest too much more, or if they did invest something and they took a chance, it was likely double what they wanted to because of the gas fees. So I'm describing this because the losses people incurred were not just around the tokens loss, it was also around the gas fee hit, which you don't get back unless there's a significant ROI due to the price appreciation that we would later see. We continue though. During this live, they do a 250 billion Saitama token giveaway. Mind you, that's not a lot because you still had 50 quadrillion in circulating supply. However, after the run-ups, that 250 billion would have been a lot of freaking tokens. Now, the stream is 3 hours long, and the chat history is lost after a time. Russ, Cult Leader, and a couple of others were mods on that channel, and they were talking about the giveaway that they were doing. So it's possible that this Married with Crypto was paid by the Saitama team to do the giveaway to help hype and promote the deal. I can't prove that he was because he didn't mark the show as paid, like you're supposed to. So I don't know if he didn't get paid and he did it out of the goodness of his heart. The question then is, how did he get that many tokens? Because again, after the run up, it would have been a substantial amount of money. And Russ was the one as the mod talking about the giveaway, which gave the impression the giveaway was being done by the Saitama team, not by Married with Crypto. We continue. After 5 days later, Jake Gain is back on it again. So from the very scratch, from when it was at its absolute lowest after launch, Jake Gain is in it as the shiller, which is why I call him a mark, because he had to have been approached from the Saitama team at some point to do this promotional from one of them. I don't exactly know who. My theory is that it was not Russ, but I can't say. I have no idea. Christina gave the impression that it was Russ because when she was on the Subcult show, she gave the impression that Jake was engaged to be a hype man. That's her words. If that's true, did that happen way back when it first crashed after launch, or did that only happen leading up to the failed November 13th Vegas event? We don't know. But 5 days after this live where they're doing a giveaway, Jake again does a basic engagement across everybody who was hyped into the project to try to get Voyager, remember them, to list Saitama. He CCs a whole bunch of people, including David Gokhshtein, who I say is an idiot, Mr. Diamond Hands, who you may remember from the Luna Classic community, MaxEquation, and Crypto Noah. Crypto Noah got suspended off of YouTube some time ago and never came back. After 2 days later, so Jake does this shill and hype push, Max retweets it. 2 days later, Max is talking about flying out to Texas to meet with the Saitama team. Texas, of course, is where Cult Leader is based out of. 1 day later, so this is how bad this was. 1 day after MaxEquation goes, Jake Gaines at it again. Now he's doing a 4 trillion Saitama giveaway on his show. That video was then deleted. So you talk about $250 billion giveaway. You talk about another 4 trillion giveaway. This is now you're starting to get into a pretty significant amount of tokens when you think about the run-ups. Somebody who had 4 trillion tokens would have made a lot of money if they had not sold leading up to the failed November 13th Vegas event, right? Follow a little bit further. 3 days later, MaxEquation retweets Manny the Rug Puller as he's telling people to buy some of these Saitama NFTs under the presentment that the NFTs are going to help Saitama get listed on exchanges. Same day, Jake chimes in and says, should I get MaxEquation on the show? Jake's all over this. Jake's all over it, and MaxEquation is retweeting stuff like crazy, contributing this piece, but he's not said anything at this point other than I'm meeting with the Saitama team. This gives the impression that he was engaged at some point early on to build something. This is what we see from this. And as a newish member of the team, he is now being asked to do these things to help promote the project to be. 5 days later, he sends a message saying that he is the one that's working on the new Saitama website. He's working on the website. The first version of the website was nowhere near the level of hype that the later one would become. The first one was pretty basic and benign. It simply talked about the tokenomics and, the One Punch Man inspiration, etc. It didn't have anything going crazy. Early September, MaxEquation goes on Cody Keeling's show and they're doing yet another giveaway. 250 billion more Saitama being given away. Think of how much now Saitama is being given away at various points at the time prior to the run-up of what it's doing. Now you look at the contrast. You've got from the case notes, V expressing concern about a whale in the project that they're trying to get out of there. You've got Cult Leader in the case notes expressing that he can shill and hype to entice new investors to get into the project. You have the development of this Wolfpack concept and this excessive promotional and outreaches to Jake again and everything else to get more people into it. But they're giving away billions and trillions of this token as an enticement to get in. Now, I'm not sure because, again, the chat history gets deleted and Jake smartly deleted all of his video stuffs. I'm not sure exactly who the winners were or what they did with these tokens. I could arguably go and scan blockchain. I'm not going to do it. It's well after the fact. It's kind of moot. I have a theory, though. There used to be, in some projects that I will not name, a very creative scam that said, we will sponsor a giveaway of a certain amount of tokens, but we'll make sure that the winner of the giveaway is always a team member. We just want to make sure that the team member is not one that's well known as a member of the team. Or it's like the wife or the girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever of one of the team members. Keep it in the family. I can't say that's what happened here, I'm simply putting out there that that was a thing in 2021 when this took place. It was happening a lot. When you would have these giveaways, for whatever reason, your regular Joe or Jane never would win it. If it was something where it's a small amount of tokens, yeah, sure, somebody wins it. But when it's a large amount, like these are relatively large amounts, you would see that, okay, who won it? And then it's some obscure someone. And it turns out later that person was somehow associated to the project. Again, I can't say for sure that's what happened. I'm saying that it's possible. I don't know. Why do I theorize it likely happened? Because with the 250 billion on this Cody Keeling show with MaxEquation, here in his own words is what MaxEquation, now this is again early on, this is not later, this is early on, what he stated was his role and purpose with the Saitama project.
But yeah, my role in Saitama, maybe I'll give you a little bit of a backstory. When I entered the project, when I first started, when I first found Saitama, it was maybe like a day old. I was playing poker with some friends, and somebody said, "Hey, you want to check this out?" It didn't have a lot of purpose and stuff. He just said, "Well, just take a look at this coin, see if there's anything that piques interest." And just saw Chad's comment.
Yeah, that's what I put it out there.
When we were in the groups and we were talking about it and seeing what direction we can set Saitama and do something good with it, after I started talking to Russell, Nam, and the faces that you see today and some that you don't, we decided that we understood that there is a gap in cryptocurrency and as far as the knowledge that is around it and the potential of blockchain technology, which I believe it's kind of inevitable to have blockchain or Bitcoin and everything part of the everyday life, or at least a derivative of it. I'm talking about 10, 20, 30, 50 years into the future. So at that point, I put an infrastructure together. As far as infrastructure, I mean like servers and a few other things. I put it together. So more of the technical side of Saitama. I am putting together the platform, developing SaitaMask along with 7 other engineers that I commissioned to get some resources behind this. And that's a little bit about me.
Some key things in what was stated. Number one, he said he was just playing poker and someone approached him about this Saitama thing. This gives the impression that whoever he was playing poker with was an investor or was one of the later team members. So Aaron or Russ or somebody. That's the impression I take away from it. Can't prove it because we didn't name any of these people. But then it goes from, hey, you should check this thing out. He takes a look at it. He sees it doesn't do shit. And then all of a sudden, he's tasked with the build. He's tasked with the development. He, quote, commissions a group of additional developers to build it out. And I think he said 7 developers. So what we're saying, now, mind you, this is September. And he said he got in roughly a day after this thing goes live, which, if I recall, is roughly about June. So if that's true, June, July, August, September. So what we're saying is that after 4 months and you got 7 developers and you're commissioned to make this thing happen, that you still didn't have a working wallet. That's what we're expected to believe. I want to educate some people that may not know this because you're not in the business. And I understand that. Most of the wallets that you see, the Uniswap wallet, the Trust wallet, all of them to some degree are derivatives. They're derived from MetaMask. And they've put their own skin on it. They've tweaked certain things. The only exception I can think of is Alpha Wallet. Alpha Wallet is pretty much from scratch, which is why it's a buggy mess today because they abandoned it. All the rest of them, to some degree, are derivatives of MetaMask where they've cleaned it up and made it look somewhat prettier in order to get people to adopt the mask. It's really not that hard to deploy a cryptocurrency mask. It wasn't then, it's not now. I'm saying that I find it personally very peculiar that you have an army of 7+ developers and you take 4 months and you still don't have a working mask. October and November, so 2 more months, and you still don't have a working mask. Remember, they didn't even get whatever the prototype was to CertiK until late November, early December. So let's get this straight. 6 months out, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, 5 months out, and you couldn't get something that was workable. Because when they did launch it, which was in the new year, late January, February-ish, you finally released something. I called out, and my video is still on YouTube, I called out how it's connected straight to testnet, and I don't recommend you get in this. I also called out issues with the authentication. I called out how it's basically exposing like critical addresses, private keys, and all this shit. I said, I don't recommend, and I will never recommend you touch this thing. We're saying 7 months through, and you still couldn't get stability. At what point does it become common sense? I'm just, again, as Saitama team, when does it become common sense that somebody made a bad call in who was selected to develop this thing? Is number one. Number two, why wouldn't it be outsourced? When I say outsourced, I mean, you don't hire somebody and say, yeah, you can go ahead and just build this stuff. You outsource it, as in you contract. Because again, there are known wallet developers out there, always have been. You contract with one of them, they literally will do it. It's called a white label service. They will build you a wallet, white label it for you, release it to you with the source code and the whole nine. Why bring this guy in? In other words, what was it about MaxEquation, Max Hernandez, MaxSaitama, that told them that this guy was competent enough to do this work? I'm not sure he truly was, because on the 9th of September, 2021, MaxEquation puts a tweet where he claims that the Discord server, their Discord channel, was compromised by a, quote, ex-staff member who we trusted with an admin role, proceeded to delete channels and kick and ban members, and they got rid of this person. An ex-staff member. So let's go back in time. In September, now this is still early, in September, we already have an ex-staff member. We already have somebody who we've gotten rid of, who we've let go, or who's quit. But number one, we gave that person admin, which assumes we trusted them at a point, and yet we left it on them prior to their departure. So I'm saying, when I say, and you hear me repeatedly say on each and every one of these, that we're dealing with blatantly stupid people, this is what I'm talking about. When I say that they're just incompetent, this is what I'm talking about. Because if you trusted someone with admin privileges over your Discord channel, they become an ex-staff member, which implies that either they left on their own or you wanted to get rid of them. Let's say they left on their own. Why would you not immediately revoke said admin rights upon their departure? Because these people are stupid. That's all I'm suggesting. And again, remember, this is the guy that was tasked with all things technical and development. So if he couldn't intercept and maintain security and safety of their Discord channel, why would you trust him with the major development of the one thing that kept the hype going after it started pumping after the September stuff where it was falling off and then it just started recovering? You put the worst possible person you can think of in front of the project. That's what they did in MaxEquation. That's the problem. We continue. 15th of September, MaxEquation goes live with the member Just Moonshot. Name may sound familiar. Just Moonshot, I'm told, was associated with what would be termed later as TARP, totally a rug pull, later rebranded to Advantis token / Advantis AI, which allegedly was abandoned by said Just Moonshot and other devs and went to Cuffin for the Dip or whatever the hell his name is. But point, I'm not going to go down that one because that's a blatant rabbit hole. The point though, Just Moonshot was aligned with, I'm told, aligned with TARP, totally a rug pull, and MaxEquation and Russ Cult Leader go live with Just Moonshot. That live was deleted. Imagine this. We continue. 2 days later, Jake Gagain is at it again, now trying to engage Mark Cuban to get him to get into Saitama. Jake Gagain's level of shill and hype for Saitama is through the roof, and MaxEquation's retweet of this is through the roof, which tells me it's possible, and I have no proof, it's possible that MaxEquation was told to help promote Saitama along with the cult leader. I can't prove that's what happened, that he was asked to do it. or he chose to do it on his own volition. I have no idea. I'm saying that I didn't see significant people doing what I see MaxEquation doing of the team. I didn't even see Manny the rug puller do it to this degree. It seems like it's something specific to him. After MaxEquation goes on the show with the Just Moonshot, and after Jake again does his shill and hype, we finally get to see some of these images where they've now changed the brand. The very first instance of Saitama Inu, you had the One Punch Man and he had the little wolf deal, and it was a white wolf hat or whatever it was. They had changed it. They changed it to where it had this halo, yellow halo thing behind it. They were sending up mock-ups of what would become Saitama. MaxEquation at the time was sending a lot of these mock-ups, making the claim that quote, yes, it's an app, and yes, it's already on my phone, and it's coming November 13th. This is direct quote from him. If it was an app that existed, and if he already had it installed and working, and he was confident enough to say that it's coming November 13th, how is it possible then that come the failed November 13th Vegas event, they don't have it ready to go? And leading up to said, cult leader said multiple times, we're not going to have it. It's not ready. We don't have it. It's not ready. We don't have it. We're just going to come to the thing and celebrate the number of holders we have. How is it possible that MaxEquation can be so confident that it is a thing and it's good to go, but yet cult leader seems to think it's not a thing and it's not ready to go? Second, MaxEquation gave the impression that there was a lot of, quote, a lot of internal testing done on Saitama. How is it possible you have a, quote, a lot of internal testing, but you still can't launch it on time? You don't revoke it. You don't call back and say, this is delayed. It's not going to happen. You tell the Times Square, it's not going to happen. Change the rotator. And despite all the internal testing in the world, you still launch it in a significantly buggy state. We have to ask the question now, because they did eventually roll something out. But if they did, quote, a lot of internal testing, how is it possible we saw the significant number of bugs that we saw? Anybody that wasn't in it, let me break down what I saw. For disclaimer, I work technology, I work software development, I work business process improvement, I support QA people. Here's the problems I saw. The very first issue, number one off scratch, it was pointed at testnet and you couldn't change it. There was a little toggle. It didn't work. You couldn't change it away from testnet. When I called them out on it, they said that was by design. No competent software developer would have put it out in such a state. No, they just screwed the pooch and left it that way. They were probably still testing and they were pressured to roll it out in a buggy state. If you don't understand the blockchain situations, when you make a blockchain transaction, in most cases, it's irreversible. You're not getting your stuff back. If you send your tokens to a bad address or something, to the point that some of these smart contract developers actually built functions to be able to retrieve lost tokens because newbies were sending coins to the wrong address because they didn't know any better. So they got smarter about adding these functions. Well, the Saitama team never did that. There were tons of people claiming they lost their tokens when this thing launched. The second thing I saw, in your browser, there are tools that let you trace the traffic going back and forth up from the server back down to you. And I saw where you could easily get access to private keys and all sorts of sensitive data that you're not supposed to see. When I called it out, they said that's by design. No, it wasn't. They just forgot to secure it and lock it down. There were issues with people not even be able to log into the damn thing. Bleaves on his show called out where he tried to do a trade for Ethereum and it wanted like pennies on the dollar for his trade. I can't imagine in my mind who would have authorized rolling it out in the state that I saw. That's how bad it was. And it took months to get to any level of stability. And I don't think it ever got there until the Cytopro, which was a new team. They hired a bunch of team members, and I think they came from India. But they hired a whole new team, a whole new look, and a whole new change. This is just prior to the departure of cult leader. We continue. September 22nd, MaxEquation says that they have just started the process of talking to CertiK about, quote, the process for audit and penetration testing for Saitama and the infrastructure around it. I want to talk about two things said here. One, just so end of September. So now you're a month and a half out from the failed November 13th Vegas event, and you're just now talking to CERTIC about all the testing, despite the fact that we knew CERTIC usually takes at least 2, if not 3, sometimes more months to complete all the testing necessary to do it. But more importantly, around this time, you heard from various members of the team that it had been fully audited, just not fully, the Saitama itself had not been audited by CERTIC. You heard that part. What we didn't know is, when did you actually start engaging with them to get this done? And the second concern I have is when they talk about, quote, penetration testing and the infrastructure around it. One of the issues that was called out, and this was after the mask launched, they had to bring it down. They said, we got hit with a DDoS attack. This is what I told the story before, where Teddy Ganja was ranting because he knows AWS, which was the back end. And he kept saying, no, it's not DDoS. You don't have AWS. No, you have AWS. It's not DDoS. Because people in the business understand that the DDoS was an excuse, and it's a lie. There's no way you could have, unless you were too stupid to turn on those protections or you purposely disabled them, because by default they're on. So this didn't make any sense. But if it's true that CERTIC was asked about, penetration, security, infrastructure, if they're asked about these fundamental things, how is it possible that after they roll it out, after the CERTIC audit, they still are subject to this attack? That's what lowered the credibility in the attack, and why I'm skeptical about why they engaged MaxEquation in the first place. Because if he has to ask CERTIC for something so fundamental, number one, and then number two, they're a month and a half away from this event where they promised to make it available, and number three, they give it to CERTIC and CERTIC gets a clean bill of health on Saitama. Does that mean they didn't check, or does that mean they didn't pay to have them check? And that's why something happened after the fact that we still don't really confirm was truly a DDoS attack. We continue. A week later, so they haven't figured this whole business out with Saitama, but a week later, MaxEquation is right back on the horn with Just Moonshot on another live. This live still exists, but Just Moonshot left it private. He probably left it private sometime after the failed November 13th Vegas event, though I cannot confirm this to be the truth. What I can confirm is that the end of September, roughly around that last couple of weeks of September, is when we started seeing some of the climbs, some of the work done, the rounds made by MaxEquation, by cult leader, Jake Again Shill, all these giveaways, and then all the pumps and the fake artificial traffic that we would hear cult leader was helping to generate off the side is starting to take effect. We're starting to see some of the run-up, the unreasonable pumps that were happening leading up to the failed November 13th Vegas event. Multiple people calling it out for what it is. The wolf pack is growing leaps and bounds. MaxEquation, the very first week, end of the first week in October, sends out the very first beta images and beta sign-up forms for what would become Saitama. So now they're soliciting requests for people to be beta testers for the product. Here's the question. If people were able to beta test it, and I distinctly remember some people said that they were able to get in and beta test the product. So now we're October, so you still have about a month-ish, give or take a week. We're in October. If you were able to get beta testers, are we saying that none of them gave you any feedback that there was any sort of a problem? And are we saying that it was at a readiness state that you could beta test it, you could roll it out? My recollection of the time is that people tried to do the beta and they were unable to get it to fully function. That's my recollection. I would love to hear from anybody who actually did try to do the beta. CryptoTalk.fm, hit the contact form and leave a comment below. Because my recollection is that nobody was effectively able to beta test the damn thing. If somebody was, their feedback was a bunch of crap. Now we start to ramp up more people, more heads, more talking heads of notoriety, starting with Manny the Rug Puller. Manny the Rug Puller gets involved. He posts a story. The story no longer exists, but they paid for an article in the local news in Nevada about what would become the failed November 13th Vegas event for Saitama. Same day, October 13th, 2021, Del Rugpull, aka Del Crypto, sends out a press release that I believe he may have paid for said press release no longer exists, but presumably about the failed November 13th Vegas event for Saitama, because he specifically says in his message, release live at the MGM, Las Vegas, November 13th, says, I'm waiting for my invite. So he's giving the impression that he was not invited to it, but he's sharing an article about it. Is it possible that he paid for said article in an attempt to get in? I don't know that. I'm asking the question openly. People respond and they say, Elon Mansour will help you get in. He's one of the team members. Everybody remembers Elon Mansour. Del Rugpull says, quote, I do follow and have always supported Saitama. I was able to identify the floor, and many have shared my Saitama success. If invited, I would love to support the Saitama event in Vegas. Stop. He was able to identify the floor. For those that don't know the inside terminology, if you're identifying the floor, you're identifying the lowest possible price that you can buy in for the maximum amount of profit. We don't know if he's referring to the floor that occurred back in September when it crapped after the initial launch, or a new floor that was established after it ran back up again. We don't know which it is, but my theory is that this floor he's describing might actually be the very first floor, as in this might be, Del Rugpool might be the very whale that V was trying to get out of it. For those that don't know the story about Del Rugpool, aka Del Crypto, Del Rugpool has been involved in at least 2 projects that I'm directly aware of specifically. I knew he was involved in Saitama. I didn't know to what degree. I know for a fact he was in Lily Finance, not Lillian Finance, Lily Finance. When it had the initial launch and it was a shit show, there were tons of messages saying that he was involved in why it went south. I can't prove this. However, Para Inu, he was also involved in that one. I know he was involved in that one because the moment that launched, it pumped up. He gave a message, boom, you should get into this business. And then it crapped and it never recovered. That's when they started going after Shillers. And I adamantly told those jackoffs to not go after Shillers. This is the wrong approach. You're going to kill the business. And they didn't listen to me, and it crapped and never recovered. Point is, I know he was involved in Lily, and I know he was involved in Para. Others have stated he was in other different projects. I can't say for sure. I know he was in another one. What was it? Something about a burn. There was some project that was burning some other ETH something, and he was involved in that one. I don't know the specifics on that one to the degree that I knew about the Para one, because the Para one, I saw it firsthand. Point is that when he says he identified the floor, it makes me wonder, tinfoil though I might be, if he was the whale that V might have been trying to get rid of at the very start, and that he might have been part of the reason that it had the initial crap prior to the climb, and he was trying to get back in, and he was likely, can't prove it, one of the ones that contributed to the velocity of the crap that would happen after the failed November 13th Vegas event. Many people online praise Del Crypto because he seems to have access to significant amounts of money to buy into projects. However, it cannot be disputed that he was involved with various projects that ended up being pump and dumps. Whether he himself was the cause, but the point is, he was involved in what would become pump and dumps, and his name got connected to pump and dumps time and time again. He did a live because people were criticizing him, and he openly said, look, I'm going to do whatever I want to do. I'm from the streets, that's a quote. He's going to do whatever he's going to do. I don't begrudge him that. If he's got the money, he could make the money. Mine was simply to expose and make aware. When you see those unrealistic climbs, you've got to understand that money doesn't just come out of nowhere. It's either artificial or somebody who's influencing the chart, because that's the only logic. So you can gamble, and that's what it is, as I said, with Hachiko. You roll the dice and hope something strikes, but if you don't get out in time, it's strongly probable that guy's never going to recover. And they know that. That's why the Jake Gaines and the others of the world that get in early, because remember, all of the coverage Jake was doing was when it basically the floor. It was the floor after the initial launch. He was in early. He may have had a bag. I didn't see it. I didn't watch his wallet, but he may have had a bag, and that's why he was shilling it so much, was to increase his bag. It's possible he might have been the one that got one of the giveaways. It's possible he got a large bag in compensation. None of it can I prove. I'm saying that when you look at the pattern of what happened, you see on this Buried with Crypto, the graph specifically showed that it was hitting a bottom. That was essentially the launch price. After the initial launch, it goes up, it goes back down. Jake starts shilling it immediately after this. You get Del Rugpull, aka Del Crypto, in there. You get Just Moonshot in there, and all the different hype that's happening at different channels. We knew that it started climbing in roughly about the last weeks of September, if not October, early. It starts to climb up again. How many tokens were those people sitting on where it might have allowed them to dump off the project? Because remember, they were tossing around 4 trillion over here and 4 trillion over here, and 250 billion over here. There was a lot of tokens floating around, and we don't know exactly who was receiving what during this period of time. We continue. The absolutely catastrophic November 13th Vegas event leading up to the Times Square banner, which I said was a bad idea. And I said, you better have that damn mask ready to go if you're going to say you can download it at the event. They did not change it. And cult leader ignored my post telling him, you better have that thing ready to go. And if you don't, you better take that rotator off because it's going to be a problem. And my video's still up there warning about what I knew was likely to happen for 3 reasons. One, I was in Nevada. I know how Nevada works and how the big events work. And I knew it was going to be a problem. But also, number 2, and probably most importantly for me, you're still in the pandemic during this time. You have travel issues. It was hard to get people from outside the state. It was hard for people to get inside the state. People were falling sick and the hotels were having issues. And that was a major problem. 3, you have increased security because of the guy that shot up the freaking thing out there. And that was a very close proximity to where this took effect. So I knew that there was going to be some lockdowns, like they had some issues getting certain camera equipment in there. It was a whole big shit show, bottom line, start to finish. And then on top of that, you don't have the mask that you promised. You're not able to produce what you said you were going to produce, and people are getting drunk. And Jake, again, he had a live stream going. I forget it was Facebook or X. He had a stream going where he's asking people for money for drinks. We know the guy's bankrolling, but he's making an idiot out of himself. And I speculated he was a fall guy. He was a mark. They wanted him to do that. Christina's the one that said they approached him to do that. They wanted somebody to film the event, and they could not do the professional equipment because of the increased security measures. What I said is that they had reached out to some people who know the area and who know what's going on with the local events. I could have helped them out, but they did not do so. And as a result, it was a catastrophic shit show. Well, MaxEquation was not able to attend the event. He said that his wife or his daughter or somebody caught COVID, and thus he could not attend the event. He gave a presentation. He was on video and gave a presentation talking about some of the things that they were planning on doing with the Saitama ecosystem and things that he was working on. Pretty sure it was his daughter, because he said something like daycare or something. But the point is, he was not at the event. People gave feedback. First of all, it was absolutely hilarious seeing them beat up Jake again for what he was doing. But most people walked away feeling most confident in what MaxEquation was presenting. They felt like his information was the only real professionalism in the entire event, that everything else was a shit show, really, and that this was kind of the point. Now, in parallel, unrelated, but in parallel, because I think it's appropriate when we think about the subcult that I described, Shaman King Inu becomes a thing. Shaman King Inu was first put up and propped up by the person known affectionately on Twitter as Faltron. Faltron took a selfie of himself, put it up, and started broadcasting it to people that he was in charge of business development and marketing for Shaman King Inu, and that he was wanting to get on Saitama, his project, to get it on Saitama, and that he was wanting to work with the Saitama deal. We would learn that Faltron allegedly had worked with Manny the Rug Puller in order to dox who would become the doctors for Terrarium after the doctors dumped out of the project, after they sold in order to go to build Terrarium. They sold for, and they lost some money, but they still made a decent amount. They took the money to go and build what became Terrarium. And allegedly, Faltron worked with Manny the Rug Puller to dox these doctors, to expose them, which caused some of the civil war that was going on between Saitama and Terrarium. separately from this civil war. That's when Luffy had pulled out and all of these different entities pulled out, and most notably Lily Finance and Brad Beatty saying, we got kids we got to deal with, we got to separate, we got to go our own way, and decided to launch on Uniswap, which was a catastrophic mess, and the allegations that Del Rugpool was at least part to blame for this. I'm saying that now, with Faltron coming in with the Shaman King Inu and putting his face on this project, only to turn out later, heading up a live stream with Christina, who's the wife or ex-wife of the cult leader, claiming he's a cokehead and he's out in Dubai with her friend who they had a threesome with, and he allegedly had paid her for blowjobs. I'm now watching and seeing everything. It was a throwback. It was a throwback to the old days, like when I think it was like 16 or something, but we used to be on chat rooms. And in the chat rooms, you'd meet someone and that person goes off to do something else later, and you encounter them later and it turns out they're an absolute jackass and you didn't know it at the time. They didn't act like it at the time, and you've gone your way, and now they are trying to get into some other business, and it becomes this spider web of absolute drama. Everything centered around Saitama. Everything that failed centered around Saitama. Shaman King Inu failed. Saitama involved. Suzuki Inu failed. Saitama involved. TARP eventually rebranded, I'm told, into Advantis Token. Advantis Token allegedly was abandoned. Turned into Advantis AI after somebody else came in and tried to take it over, and then that crapped. Terrarium crapped. Lily turned into Lillian. Lillian crapped. Everything Saitama touched crapped. And the only takeaway people had from the failed November 13th Vegas event was that MaxEquation's presentation about what was likely to come on the development side was the only professionalism at the event. People still speculated, though, that he was sitting home selling, dumping tokens off the project. We would learn later from the case docs that indeed he was selling a major amount of tokens. He certainly didn't have the max. That was Manny the rug puller. But the point is, he was absolutely selling a crap ton of tokens himself. And we don't know exactly what points during this climb. Was it in the October timeframe when he was starting to contribute some of these betas and some of these screenshots and everything else, and when the holder counts were increasing? We don't know exactly when Max was getting involved with the dump side of things. We do know that he was involved with the hype side of things from square one. And we have to watch and see. Now, I'm talking at the time, we got to watch and see, does this thing even stabilize? Do we get a working mask or not? We continue. November 14th, so 11 days after the failed November 13th Vegas event, Certic chimes in and says, we are auditing the Saitama wallet. This is right around the time that Certic on their site said, yeah, we're about 30% of the way. And this caused a major dump because people expected that Saitama would be further along because they were told that it was close to ready. We're almost there. We're almost ready. We're just about there. We're getting really close to only to find out. That's why I say the damn thing could not have existed. It's not possible, because if you had it to a point, let's say 96% of readiness, to the point that you can turn it over to Certic, and now we're in late November, right? So right after the event, you essentially have it ready to go. You give it over to Certic, but by the time you launched it in that following year, it was an absolute buggy shit show. How can that be unless Certic essentially fast-tracked it or did not do the thorough audit that people might have expected that you were sold? Remember, the Certic audit is a paid audit, and that came out of your money. So if you paid for an insufficient audit that might have put your stuff at risk and caused unreasonable pumps, we're right back at square one. Certic also did not call out at any time, the testnet. How can that be? Unless the testnet version is what they gave them, and these numbnuts forgot to turn it to real live prod when they gave it to the regular investors. We continue. Late December, the test version of Saitama, this is what I'm calling out, is actually put on the stores. People download it. They put tweets telling people not to use it because it's the test version necessary to pass the Certic, but people download it. They don't know any better. And some people actually legit lost tokens because they were trading on the test version, the test net, because it was locked. You could not switch it to the main. the person we would now understand to be Michael Thompson, who, if you remember that name from one of the past ones, Michael Thompson is involved, but to a very light degree. He's basically out there as a hypester on the hip hop side and some of the sports side. He does photos with Dr. Irving, Julius Irving, and he does Ice Cube chats and all this bullshit that doesn't really matter. He later would go to the VZZN token, which was called out in the case notes. Mind though, the case notes did not declare Michael Thompson a conspirator. We continue. Late January, February timeframe-ish, they finally released a version of Saitama that's at least workable, although I still was not recommending it. This is when they changed the logo again to that orange, yellow, whatever, and they added a whole bunch of pretty stuff. And I actually said, why are you focused on the pretty stuff when the thing's not fully functional? But regardless, point is they release it in a somewhat functional state, but the swap was having issues. People were calling out that they still couldn't do basic swaps. They were having problems. Because remember, the whole sales pitch of Saitama was no longer a need to deal with Ethereum's gas, that you would use Saitama tokens for the gas. That was the whole sales pitch. That was the whole impetus behind going with something like this, was this concept of using Saitama as the gas. Sounds good in concept. Problem is that Saitama being an ERC token, it still wasn't going to work. And ultimately you still had gas in order to do the basic transactions, unless you were doing, a layered blockchain, which they weren't at the time. They talked about doing it, but at this time, they didn't have anything of that nature. You could argue something like a change now model where you can trade this for this, but it still charges you gas. You just don't see it. It's baked into the transaction. If it's possible that they were going to copy that model, that's fine, but that's not what they sold you on. During the month of February and March, to a lesser degree, March, they were doing points where they were constantly taking it down and doing maintenance on the mask. It still wasn't at a complete state yet, but in March, they already were moving on to the next shiny. They were already developing other stuff because Max kept talking about other things that they were building. And I'm like, wait a minute, the mask ain't done yet. You're not finished yet. In March, I did a video and I was just trying to help them out. I wasn't trying to shill it. I was trying to help them out because they sent out a broadcast on Twitter and Max was pushing this. Allegedly, OKX reached out with this contest that said, if you can get your community behind your token, we'll list you on OKX, which is another central exchange, and they wanted the exposure. And so all of them, arguably, sent out a bunch of messaging for people to go and vote to get listed on OKX. The problem with this, as I said, you had to deposit tokens into OKX in order to get the voting on this business. Elon Mansour chimes in, which is rare for him for something like this. He's rare, but he chimes in and he's saying, all you got to do is deposit $10 of Saitama. From what I recall, they didn't win this. And I believe the reason they didn't win it was because of the failed November 13th Vegas event. All the people that had dumped out of the project. Now the holder count still showed 300,000 plus or 200,000 plus or whatever it was. But a lot of people had dumped out. Since there were reflections, you still had dust amounts going to wallets, which was part of the game, going to wallets that gave the illusion of holders that were not decreasing, despite the fact that we didn't see the same traffic of increase of holder counts that we saw prior to said event. So my theory, if I'm recalling correctly, and they did not win the contest, my theory is because nobody had any confidence in the team anymore. And it didn't matter. They had already lost the sweet spot in order to get this. And OKX, for their part, they could have just gone ahead and listed Saitama if they really wanted Saitama on there. And I theorized at the time that OKX was probably doing it to rub it in Saitama's face. I can't prove it, but why else would you do this after this catastrophic failure at the failed November 13th Vegas event, and then multiple failures on Saitama? And you do this right at the point they're trying to stabilize the damn thing. At the end of March, MaxEquation is talking about working the back end of Saitama, and the Saita Realty becomes a thing. And I again said, you're focused on there's too much sprawl here. There's too much sprawl. You're doing too much. You need to sit down and get one thing right because you ain't done it yet. But I was trying to get the benefit of the doubt. When I looked at the Saita Realty white paper, I saw all sorts of issues. Number one, setting aside the basics of like spelling and grammar, that wasn't even it. I saw just this isn't going to work. You're not going to be able to pull this off. And why are you even focused on this when you haven't got the core one settled yet? And you still haven't solved the whole situation with Lily Finance that was off on the side and whatever that fallout was, and all these other listings that would happen. I'm going to be talking about on a different episode next weekend. I'm going to be talking about the contract that they had for the Saitama listing, which may help shed some light on why Luffy pulled out. I don't know if it's the reason that they pulled out, but I'm going to be analyzing that contract from the lens of somebody who's done contracts multiple times for the things I saw. But I'm saying that at the time that they're doing all this garbage, especially with Site of Realty, when I say garbage, the Site of Realty, the Site of Logistics, the Site of EDU, and all this crap that they're spinning up, shiny after shiny after shiny, when they hadn't got the core working. They haven't got the mass working. It's not doing anything that they promised it was going to do. And it seemed like that they had given up on making this thing work, because despite MaxEquation constantly talking about, hey, I'm still working on this thing, they still couldn't get it working. Like they were working on this thing all the way minimum through like half the 2022. Roughly about April-ish 2022, there's rumors about a V2, that they're going to roll Saitama into a V2 and relaunch it. This actually did happen, but my point is, in early May, they denied, specifically MaxEquation, but I remember all of them, they denied there was any V2 planned. Somebody said that, hey, we talked about it, but there's nothing definitive. It's not a thing. It's not going to happen right now. We would do an announcement if we were going to do it, but right now we're muscling forward with what we got. Consider they had flushed the whale out, according to all the case stuff. They had flushed the whale out, so they're already past that. They would have already done the sells because the price is crapping like crazy. So they'd already done the sells that were reported in the case docs. Significant amounts of the token, 10% of the supply, essentially dumped off the deal, millions of dollars pocketed on this. So the heist has already been completed. Once the heist is completed, there's still liquidity in the project, but it was locked on the first Saitama. It was locked. When you roll to a new project, and I've said anytime you do a migration and a relaunch, they never succeed. None of them have, other than certain ones that got lucky. Floki was a twice over rug pull, if I recall. It's like a V3 or whatever. But Floki never got to the level of success it should have had if it didn't have those. That's what I mean. All the other ones that did it have crapped because you have a loss of sentiment and the information is not readily available. So when this rumor comes out about this, people are concerned what it means. Does it mean I'm going to lose my money? What are you going to do to make sure that we're staying whole? Max is trying to keep it on track and say, for right what I know, we're continuing with the regular Saitama token. We're not doing a V2 as far as I know. 2 weeks later, he sends a message and basically says the original quote, the original vision for Saitama has shifted, but it can still get to where I wanted to get it to in the future. Okay. And he's saying he's quitting. He's saying effective immediately. This is May 18th. He's effective immediately. I'm done. I'm not going to be a Devin Saitama anymore and not going to be part of the LLC because, again, his name was on there as a managing member. So he's completely getting out of it. He says he's going to stay as a supporter. He doesn't say that he's going to stay as an investor. I believe, and this is a theory because I can't prove it, I believe that at this point, this is when the decision was made to do the V2. I believe he was not on board with doing the V2. I believe that he had already sold off the vast majority of tokens and that the V2 might have caused other issues as a reason why he pushed back. I have no way to know, but it's kind of, again, I remember this. It was out of nowhere that he decided to back off the business and go a different direction. But I'm saying at this point, it's the only logical explanation of why he would, again, this is the guy that was put in charge of seeing this through, this Saitama through to the end. And right at the time that he says that we're getting close, he up and leaves. We continue. The case document states the end of May as the last date that they could find sells done by this notorious four, cult leader, Manny the Rug Puller, Nam Tran, and Max Hernandez. Max Hernandez would make just shy of $11 million off of his share of the sales. Not the highest, certainly not the lowest, but nowhere near as high as Nam, nowhere near as high as Manny the Rug Puller. This is why I speculated it's possible, and I have no evidence, I'm spitballing here. I think it's possible he was a mark as well, but he was very deep involved, as in they put his name as registered on different, he was a managing member. He was a registered agent. They had his name on legal documentation as the point person and point of contact for things legal, as a managing member of the LLC, when his origin was sitting at a poker table, hearing somebody say, you might want to take a look at this, ending up being the lead developer, somehow conscripting 7 different developers to work a project that they never really fully completed. Tells you 2 things, obvious things. 1, there's no way he was qualified to do it, so why would somebody have engaged him? And did he give the impression, did he lie about his qualifications? 2, when he left, May, that's the point that they saw the sales had stopped. So is it possible that he basically was the last one selling, that he had sold out after it crapped, and that's why he didn't make nearly what the other ones did in terms of Manny the Rug Puller and Nam? Is it possible that Cult Leader didn't sell until he got fired, by which point it was worth near nothing? We know that they bought the land and they bought the truck and they bought all the shit. So we know that Cult Leader sold some. So that is it possible he didn't sell all of it and he still had a major bag when he was kicked out of the group? We don't know enough about why Cult Leader was only just shy of 3 million. And we don't know enough about why Max Hernandez was just shy of 11 million. We don't know when Max specifically sold all of it, or did he sell all of it, or did he have some of it still? Because when Saitama would become a thing, we know that they dropped the Binance Smart Chain tokens to everybody who was still a holder over a certain threshold. I mean, it had to be reasonable, but pretty much everybody got these tokens. Is it possible that these guys were still holding some tokens, and when Saitama becomes a thing, they dump off the rest of it? But this was not reported in the case document because the case document did not call out Saitama's activities as part of it. Or is it possible that they sold everything that they had at the time, which means that Cult Leader only had the lesser amount of tokens, the lowest amount of the 4. And so they basically wasted it on garbage, a Lambo and a truck and shit. And then Max Hernandez was just smart about it, rode the thing. And I would guess he had to have been selling over time. He had to have been selling, November, late December, January, February, and he's putting shit out there to kind of help keep it sustained as much as possible. If my theory is correct, and they were dumping, especially him, dumping all the way through to May, it's possible that if they had not been dumping, Saitama would not have crapped to the degree that it did, with the exception of the doctors, because they sold millions of it. But remember, this was $7 billion at a point. I'm saying that theirs was a small fraction of what was really in this thing. But if they were selling monthly as it was going down and just chunking it out, they might have been the reason that it never recovered, especially if they had their staked in liquidity pools. If they were pulling the liquidity pools, it would have increased the volatility. It would have made it much more difficult for it to sustain its present value. I'm not blaming. I don't know because I didn't see it. I'm saying the number that Max took away of just shy of 11 million and then Cult Leader of just shy of 3 million, right there, dollars, right there is a significant sum of money. We know what Cult Leader was buying and when. We know that Christina said, yes, we were broke before we got into this. So we knew that much. We don't know if Cult Leader sold all of it and that's all he had, or he was still sitting on bags and sold after it turned into Saitama. We don't know that. And we don't know if Max Hernandez sold all his, or he had a bag when it went to Saitama. That's what we don't know. Given this guy, Hernandez, was set as the lead developer and lead technical person, but apparently incapable of getting the damn thing working, I wanted to understand better. Was there anything that he did right? And guess what? There was something that he did right, because during this phase, so we're talking July, August, September, October phase, there was a collusion happening with the cult leader and Nam Tran with Max Hernandez to exploit DEX Tools. DEX Tools has a feature called the DEX score. I called out that the DEX score was promoted by Strange Emu, and I said that any project that's heavily promoting the DEX score, I don't trust because it can be manipulated. You can influence it. It's easy to do it. In the case document, they called out that Max Hernandez allegedly was part and parcel, guided by Nam, but he was a part of it. During this process, when he was allegedly building up Saitama and allegedly working on stability, this is prior to the launch of the failed launch, that he's working on stability and he's getting it ready for Surdic and he's doing all these things and he's heads down working this development initiative that allegedly Max Hernandez used one of the servers that was supposed to back Saitama to run fake traffic through the DEX score to artificially pump it. Nam was running it on his laptop. Nam, like a dumbass, shared a video of his laptop running these different sessions out to some of the other people to show how it can be done. And he has like 14 windows where he's exploiting the DEX score. What does that do? People that don't know any better see that, oh, the DEX score is kind of high, and they FOMO into it. And this is when I say artificial pumps. It didn't have to be bots, although there is some scripting involved. It didn't have to be bots. Humans can do this. And that's what they were doing. Largely headed by Nam, but the reason I'm pointing at Max Hernandez is the allegation that he was using the server, one of them, that backed Saitama. Well, when they said, after they launched it, they said they got a DDoS attack. And that's when the Teddy Ganda, no, it's not DDoS, he got AWS, right? Is it possible? Is it possible that no, they didn't get a DDoS attack? Is it possible that the scripts or whatever it was that they were doing killed the server because inbound traffic of people trying to hit the mask at the same time that they're artificially pumping something caused basically a resource constraint that killed off the server and caused it to bring it to its knees, that it was not a DDoS attack at all, that it was them running this shady business to artificially pump things? Is it possible that Max Hernandez himself is the reason why the Saitama was so unstable because of whatever sketchy code that he was running? Is it possible that the code that they were running was malicious or had some sort of malicious code built within it where something happened to the server and it got compromised? Is it possible that when they launched Saitama as a test net, that was done intentionally because they wanted to hide the traffic that was happening and they tossed the test net on a different server that was under spec on purpose to trigger crashes to hide the fact that they were doing this off the side? It's called a Chewbacca. I'm just spitballing here, tinfoil though I might be. I'm just spitballing. When I saw, as part of the case, this guy who was put in charge of all things technology is allegedly taking a server when at a time he's telling you that he's working on this mask and its stability, and he's running this job that's designed to artificially pump and cause a FOMO run. It doesn't surprise me that he was doing it. It surprises me that he chose the server backing Saitama to do it. That's what surprises me, because I said before, you got to be a blistering idiot to leave this kind of a trail. And Nam's a blistering idiot too for video recording his screen doing an illegal fluctuation here. You're illegally pumping your token and you're video recording it. You're creating the very evidence that was used against you. So then we have to ask the question, because the case said that Nam distributed this to the so-called defendants. When it says defendants, we know who the defendants are. It's the four, notorious four, individual one, individual two. Individual that's in Australia, we don't know who that is. We do know that one of the individuals is Aaron Mansour. I said in one of my past that it's possible the reason these two are not identified is that they are considered unindicted co-conspirators, and perhaps one of them cooperated with this investigation, because if only these 5 or 6 people got the video, that means one of them had to provide it to the feds. That means it's an inside. They supported it, but were they always an insider? Was it basically a flag mission, or did somebody get compromised after the fact? Somebody caught some breadcrumbs and they approached the person on the sly and they said, we got this on you. Either you cooperate or you're going to jail for 50 years. And that person bowed a knee and started giving up the dust. I think, theory, spitballing, I think one of these individuals that were unnamed got an ethical bright light hit them in the face. They said, I'm not feeling good about this. Something feels wrong. And I'm going to just stack evidence. I'm going to keep this and cover my ass because I feel like this is going to come back and bite me. And if it does, I want to have evidence ready to go so I can cover myself and just basically drop a dime when come time. That's a theory. I can't say that's what happened because we don't think that cult leader was going to do something like that because he was right there in front getting enriched. We knew that Manny the rug puller didn't do it because he made the most money. And we know these two were not named, which usually means they're unindicted co-conspirators. So I think whoever from Australia or this other, which is believed to be Aaron Mansour, stacked and kept evidence. They kept chat logs from Telescam. They kept this video bullshit. They kept the comments made from Max Hernandez. They kept all this data just in case somebody came after them. And when somebody did come after them, they were ready to go with a treasure trove of key information that brought all the rest of them down. I can't say for sure that that's really what happened. I am saying, from what I can tell, these were very stupid people we're talking here. I have seen again some very silly, stupid people in my life, and I could not have replicated the level of idiocy that I saw with this business. So, Max Hernandez, in summary, was a person that I believe was another Mark. I think it was a Mark in the sense that they approached him and his dumbass presented himself as smarter than he really was and presented that he was able to do something that he couldn't do. My question is, whoever approached him and put him in that role was stupid to not have checked his credentials. Because by checking, you're talking work product. Show me some example of some development that you've done in the past. Did he just show an example of a website? Did he show no example at all? Did they not ask for an example at all? Because how can you get somebody so damn incompetent in there? And then leading up to the failed November 13th Vegas event, when it's crystal clear this ain't going to work, and you still go forward with it. Now, mind you, Max had sold. He dumped a crazy amount of tokens prior to it. I just said, I don't know how much more he had above and beyond what he dumped. We know he sold a shit ton. We know for a fact that Max Hernandez, MaxEquation, the sweet spot for the pumps, for the unreasonable run-up, the sweet spot I said was October, late September, October span, and then the week or so just prior to the failed November 13th Vegas event. That was a sweet spot for a significant run-up. We're talking the billions and billions. Money was just flowing like crazy. We know for a fact that sometime in this span, all of them dumped tokens. We know that for a fact. What we didn't know for sure is how much people had. That's the missing element. We know how much they sold. We don't know how much they had. Russ, I said he had to have been the Mark because he didn't have shit. He didn't have a lot. He simply didn't. And Max Hernandez had a crazy amount of tokens. They bought some of them, but we don't know how many. We don't know if they bought them from V, and we don't know how many they ultimately bought. Because remember, it went up and it went down. Did they stack more off the dip? We don't know that. We don't have all of the data. We simply know that they sold at the right time just before, when they were generating hype, artificial and human alike, with Jake Gagain as the Mark and Just Moonshot as the Mark, and Max Hernandez pushing a fake wallet that didn't really exist, because I don't care what the fuck he says. It didn't exist. We know for a fact these things. We know that they all got enriched prior to the event. We know from Christina that they paid people with some of the money, and we know what they were doing, talking about cult leader. We know what they were doing with some of the money. We suspect, we don't know for sure, but we suspect that Max Hernandez was, because he showed something, he was on video, so clearly he was aware and available, and he was talking about stuff that got high praise, but we suspect that the stuff he said he was doing was bullshit, because we would learn later that the server was used to artificially pump Dex score. So we knew whatever it was he said he was doing with the mask, his focus was not on developing the mask. His focus was on hype and pump, artificial though it might be. Same with Nam. So anybody that felt that MaxEquation got a rough deal, and by the way, early 2023, he was never seen again online. He quit Twitter. But anybody that believed that MaxEquation, Max Hernandez got a raw deal, and he was trying as hard as he could, and he was a hard worker and all this shit, man. It's interesting the different people dynamics we're dealing with here, right? You get cult leader, and he's the charmer. He's the snake, right? Coming out of the pot with somebody playing. He's the charmer. That's what he does. And he says a bunch of shit that doesn't mean anything. You got Manny the rug puller. Manny the rug puller is the defensive end. He's just playing defense. He's attacking people left and right over there. MaxEquation is putting out bullshit images and reposting other hype, including Jake Gain, and engaging other people like Just Moonshot to help hype and pump and hype and pump. Meanwhile, presenting like he's doing all this major development work when he really wasn't doing anything. And they go on lies with cult leader, and turns out they weren't doing anything, even though they were presenting that we're hard at work, we're going to release it, we're ready to go, it's almost ready to go, all that. Nothing was true, because when they released something, it was still in an unusable state because it was testnet, which made no sense, and they claimed that was intentional, and we knew it was bull. I'm saying that the people dynamics of all the different scammers involved in this is amazing. As a result, we have one more person that we have to talk about for the Saitama team related to this situation. That is Nam. We're going to talk about Nam next week. We're going to talk about Manny the rug puller after Nam. Manny the rug puller is our end game. We're not going to talk about Steve Rocket Crypto. My theory was they used him for the black influence. Same with Willie D. Same to a lesser degree, Michael Thompson. I think that they were exploited for the black community's exposure. That's my theory. I have no evidence of it, but that's my theory that I'm going to hold to, because I saw no evidence that any of the three of them did anything sketchy. In fact, Steve Rocket Crypto had called out that he believed that we didn't even own the wallet code and it belonged to a completely different entity, not owned by MaxEquation, which would correlate to what I'm saying, that MaxEquation wasn't really doing anything other than giving you the sense that he was doing something. So we must now talk about Nam, because we know Nam's a blistering idiot from the case notes. But I'm curious to understand, what is Nam's involvement now? Because Nam went over to Cytochain with Manny the rug puller, and people started doing Nam we trust instead of Russ we trust. So we must understand, where does Nam begin and end? We must then understand where it all came full circle with Manny the rug puller, who's getting defensed, by the way. I'm talking online. People are defending him. But we have to understand all that. And with Nam. Nam is going to be difficult to find a lot of information about because he didn't speak that much. From what we can tell, he was very heavily involved, but he had not done significant amounts of sales before the event. He did leading up to it, but not before it. So what I'm saying is that in that sweet spot, the beginning of the sweet spot, he did a little bit, he was chunking out cells. And I believe with Nam, and this is what I'm going to dig into, so it's going to be a juicy episode. I think Nam got to a point in October where he saw, we're shit on this mask. This ain't going to work. And he just said, I'm cutting my losses and going. We'll dig into that. We will understand what we think happened. And certainly Manny the rug puller is going to be the hardest one because there's so much with what he's done. You're going to have a lot of opinions about what I say about this guy, because there's a lot of people like him. What I can tell you is he's in the case doc yourself. So you can say it's FUD. FUD is false information designed to harm a thing. Nothing I say is false. It's what I see and what I can recall. And fortunately, I recall a lot about rug puller, especially in the Cytochain side. And I've called it out, and I'm on video, and I've not been wrong. Nam, I haven't exposed myself to. I've never talked to him, didn't hear much from him, but he's all over this too. I'm saying, though, that his involvement intrigues me because I believe, we have confirmed Max Hernandez was likely a mark. When he was first engaged, he misrepresented, my theory, misrepresented what he was capable of doing, and dumbasses took him at his word, and he was right at the front of the reason that this all crashed and burned. And when they realized, okay, this shit's toast, they decided to jump off the sinking ship before it hit the iceberg. He was a mark. And then he tried to salvage it and salvage reputation to do another run of dump, realized it wasn't going to work, quit the project suddenly, and never looked back. That's what I think happened. If somebody has some insight, I'd love to hear it. Hit me. But I'm theorizing Max Hernandez was another mark. Maybe he wasn't, but I think he was a mark. I think V was one of the orchestrators of what started this chaos. I think Cult Leader was a mark. I believe that. I believe he got enriched because he realized some point later shit was about to hit the fan. That's what I think happened with Max Hernandez, another mark. We're seeing a lot of marks. Was Nam a mark? We're going to find out next weekend.